Hi there. I feel the need to preface these chapters, with a short statement. First off, content warning. We're talking about the lead up to the Holocaust and the Holocaust. Horrible shit. And secondly, I want to say that as a non-scholar, I found it very difficult to write these chapters. Not only because of the sheer horror of it all, but moreover, when talking about the Nazis and what the Nazis did, I discovered it's quite difficult not to slip into their use of language. By which I mean, even to say the Nazis targeted Jews is not unproblematic, because that term, Jews in this context, doesn't mean only people of the Jewish faith. The Nazis were eugenicists. They believed in bullshit race science, and they had a special ministry for racial classification that constructed this category of Jews and of antisocials and career criminals and so on. Based on arbitrary, constructed conditions, any person might fall under this or the other category. You could be oblivious to Judaism, or agnostic, or converted to Christianity, or whatever, and still fall under the racial category of Jew if the record showed you had one Jewish grandparent, for instance. So I've tried to be good about contextualizing terms like that throughout these texts, but I didn't find it easy or obvious to do. And if I mess up, now and again, please understand, I'm trying my best here. I'm not used to doing this, and I'm certainly not trying to be insensitive. So extra special thanks again to my friend Saša, Cortés, for helping me with these chapters. I wouldn't have been able to do those without you. And with that being said, let me just add, that siamo tutti antifascisti over here, and fuck the Nazis and their spineless collaborators all the way to the fiery pits of hell. Like and subscribe, and I'll start the show. Let's do it. Chapter 6, 1933 Census. Content warning, discussion of the Holocaust. So Hollerith had been very protective of his invention, of his tabulating machine, while the whole thing was still his enterprise. Right? He'd never sold his machines. He'd only leased them for vast sums and under very tight restrictions. On top of that, he pursued any and all imitators vigorously. Watson retained these practices, and while others have made a great deal out of Watson's leadership and ingenuity, I'm sure he was a great manager, it's worth keeping in mind what wildly game-changing technology he commanded. He enjoyed enormous demand, right? The savings through applications of the technology always exceeded expectations, and importantly, the monopoly IBM held on the production and distribution of punch cards themselves could make up as much as a third of their revenue. For those reasons, I'm not going to dwell too much on the success that the company enjoyed under Thomas Watson's management, or on the puff pieces that would regularly be printed about him, or on the songs that his exponentially growing number of employees would sing about the man. Instead, I'm going to focus on the time Watson really did go where none of his competitors would. So, 25 years ago, in 1997, the historian Edwin Black was visiting the Washington, D.C. Holocaust Museum. One exhibit there especially attracted his attention. On display, in a glass case, there was an old tabulating machine bearing the IBM logo with a small card attached. On this card was printed the sentence, "In 1933, IBM helped Adolf Hitler conduct a national census." Edwin Black, not having heard about this, and being the son of two survivors of the Holocaust, became curious. The research he went on to conduct on this topic, together with the help of a number of international scholars, led him to some astonishing discoveries. The resulting revelations were published in the 2001 book IBM and the Holocaust, the principal source for these IBM chapters, a long but excellent and very much recommended read. Let's return to the 1920s, the Roaring Twenties. Why were they called that again? After contributing significantly to winning the First World War, the United States were on an economic upswing and were truly beginning to cement their place in the world as a superpower. It was a time of great wealth and excess. Great Gatsby, you know? But the 20s weren't roaring everywhere. In Germany, the economy was not doing well at all, as the country had sanctions imposed on them for their part in World War I. Remember Dehomag from last chapter, Hollerith's German subsidiary? So the Germans running it had actually bought a controlling share of the subsidiary around the time that Hollerith sold his company to Flint. But by the early 20s, during the economic slump, they were close to bankruptcy, and so Watson, who had international ambitions from the get-go, was able to swoop in and buy a controlling share back for a pittance, thus turning it back into a IBM subsidiary. The Depression in Germany also had this other effect. It produced resentment in a population that wanted change, and that got it in 1933 when they voted into power a man who promised to restore their greatness. Failed artist farting problem, I think you know who I'm talking about. While the question of how early on did Hitler know he would commit a genocide is debated to this day, the story of the data processing technology that was crucial to carrying it out so efficiently is more clear-cut, thanks to Edwin Black. The same year Hitler was elected as Chancellor, his government commissioned Dehomag to carry out a census. Now, you might be forgiven for failing to anticipate what was to come, what Hitler was building to in the year 1933. You might be. I mean, of course, Hitler was always vocal about his hatred for Jews, and yes, there was an immediate eruption of violence against the Jewish population in Germany, and yes, there were worldwide boycotts and displays of solidarity. However, there was little public awareness about punch card technology, even less about how instrumental this technology was for governing, and the simple facts that, one, the German government was undergoing intense reorganization now, and two, this government was very interested in monitoring its population closely, meant that there was an enormous business opportunity for IBM there. The company, which by that point controlled 90% of the punch card technology market worldwide. As IBM had learned during the Great Depression, when government bureaucracy was massively expanded to help the US population and control businesses, that was a gold mine. Red tape was a gold mine for them. So there were no qualms. There was no hesitation. Dehomag, as managed by Willi Heidinger under the direction of Watson, was more than happy to carry out the census. IBM would provide all the machines and would design and print new punch cards for this census. Across the rows and the columns of these punch cards, information about all German citizens would be encoded. Information like their age, their occupation, their gender, their religion. While there is no evidence to suggest that Watson personally sympathized with the Nazi cause, he certainly wasn't opposed to it either, right? Willi Heidinger, manager of Dehomag, was, however, an outspoken Nazi. In a speech to some Nazi officials, Heidinger compared the statistical analysis of the population via punch card technology to a medical examination. Quote, dissecting cell by cell the German cultural body, and compared Hitler to a national physician prescribing remedies for what threatens the racial purity of the population. To quote the rest of that speech, and sorry, this is really gross, we are proud that we may assist in such a task that provides our nation's physician, Hitler, with the material he needs for his examinations. Our physician can then determine whether the calculated values are in harmony with the health of our people. It also means that if such is not the case, our physician can take corrective procedures to correct the sick circumstances. Our characteristics are deeply rooted in our race. Therefore, we must cherish them like a holy shrine, which we will and must keep pure. We have the deepest trust in our physician and will follow his instructions in blind faith, because we know that he will lead our people to a great future. Hail to our German people and der Führer. Sorry about that. I only quoted that so you know what landed on Watson's desk, right? Because this speech was cabled back to New York and translated for Watson. In response, Watson sent Heidinger a message of congratulations for a job well done and sentiments well expressed. And as Edwin Black discovered and made known in 2001, IBM's collaboration with Hitler's Germany did not end with the 1933 census. In fact, it was only getting started.